Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our afternoon session. I hope you enjoyed your lunch break and had plenty of time to network with your colleagues. We've got such an exciting room and we've got a really exciting panel to close the show for day one. Our panel discussion is around challenges and advocacy for the presence of women in the project management industry. And to introduce it, would you please welcome back to the microphone the chair of AIPM, Connie Beck.
Thank you. My favourite session. I'm very passionate about this, so I'm very excited to open our Women in Project Management panel. Over the past few decades, we've made significant strides, and I hope to see continued progress for women in project management, along with the strengthening of the voice, not just in project management, for women in general. And I think it's really, really important, and it continues to make great progress, which is great, and it's something that Darius has been driving under his leadership for us to really put the spotlight on and continue to grow. Project management is a field that thrives on collaboration, innovation and strategic thinking. It's a profession that requires the ability to see the big picture, navigate complex challenges and bring people together on a common goal. Women have been demonstrating these skills and contribution to this field in remarkable ways, yet their representation and recognition are not always commensurate with contributions. I would like to express my thanks to Darius for championing a lot of the activity to drive women in project management and just women present in our institute over the last 12 months. We've worked on bringing this panel to you, so thank you to the team that have been involved in that as well. And your passion and dedication in not just being here this afternoon, but in any contribution you make to uplifting such a great cause and making sure women in project management continues to grow in numbers, to grow in presence, and to grow in confidence is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie, and we have a team of absolute experts to speak to this, and I'll introduce first our panel facilitator, who is a project manager with AIPM Group. This brings from 3 decades of construction project management experience. She has a diverse background which spans both private developer and government project investments and was recently appointed as the Project Controls Community of Practice Lead at AIPM. Would you please welcome Lauren McDougall? Lauren will be facilitating our expert panel, and I'd now like to welcome them up. ANZ Regional Director for Program Management and Water at ACOM, Laura Fluck. Chair of the Board of National Association of Women in Construction, Jennifer Gillette. Department of Defence Capability Acquisition and Sustainment Group, currently Acting Assistant Secretary of Strategy and Planning Branch, Christina Langwell. And founder of Build Like a Girl, a national not-for-profit charity which is a direct call to action to help women gain apprenticeship employment, receive mentoring and support, and to combat the negative cultural experiences that women face in the industry every day. Please welcome Jo Farrell. Now delighted to hand over to Lauren, whose expertise will take us through the afternoon. There may be an opportunity for Q&A, and if so, I'll be running around with a microphone. So Lauren will let you know when it's that time. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Steph. Thank you so much, Connie, and thank you, AIPM, for the opportunity. I'm actually going to throw first to the crowd. Who has faced challenges in their career? Put your hand up. Excellent. Who hasn't faced challenges in their career? Interesting. And who has been an advocate to help somebody move through their career? Who has had an advocate to help them move through their career? Excellent. Whilst we are focusing on women today, and we're going to speak to these amazing women, I'm sure everybody's going to take something away from today as a lessons learned from this discussion. So thanks so much for being here today. Jennifer, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay.
Of course.
So what are the most significant barriers women face when entering and advancing in the project management industry?
Thank you, and hello everyone. In my time with NAWIC, it's been pretty obvious. The barriers are, at the very start, awareness. Hands up in this crowd who had a discussion with their careers counsellor about a career in project management. There's one. So we do a lot of advocacy, so does Joe, in regards to awareness of the diversity of careers. Step one, there's the barrier right there. And then upon stumbling across this wonderful career that we're all aware of, then you start to see some varying things like cultural issues, unconscious bias, which we start to talk about now, about conscious bias, people wanting to work with people just like themselves. So there's a few barriers, but we like to spin around on the awareness and telling those positive stories of what we love about working in the industry.
Thanks so much. And Joe, I know you come from a different sort of you're working within the construction industry. You started off as a carpenter, and then you worked your way up, and you are an advocate and holding board roles in NAWIC as well as WCA. I'd love to hear your perspective on the obstacles that women face in project management careers.
The obstacle, I think, is really just in terms of how society and industry view and value women and their contribution. I think that what Jen just spoke about around stigma and stereotype and not having those conversations early are all brought about by the conditioning that happens at a really young age about what's applicable for men and what's applicable for women. Not only in society but in workplaces. I mean, for me, I was told that I can't be a carpenter because I was a girl. And that was the simple reason, and that was the only reason. And so, throughout my entire career, and I've been in construction now for 28 and a half years, each step that I wanted to take forward, I was told I can't do that. And it was really based around gender. And so for me, it's been, I guess, a living proof argument and really reinforcing the fact that no one should be putting limitations on anyone else. We should be giving everybody the opportunity to try first and then make a determination. But I think that the stigma and the stereotype and those barriers that Jen was just speaking about just a moment ago, why aren't we viewing and valuing women and their contributions in the same way that we do men? That's the starting point for me.
Absolutely. And did you speak to your guidance counsellor?
Yes, so I said, can I please go to the steelworks with all the other boys, because that's where they go to get apprenticeships. And he said, why? And I said, because I want an apprenticeship. And he said, go and be a hairdresser. Look at my hair, I'm never going to be a hairdresser. That was not for me. So there was a conversation. It was the wrong conversation.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. Okay, I'm going to speak to yourself, Christina. Can you please tell me from your perspective, from a defence perspective, what are the significant barriers that you feel women are facing in the project management industry?
Sure, I think it's how do you get into project management? Because, as you said, I'm not sure if anyone comes out of school and says, I want to be a project manager. I fell into it. I was just doing some odd jobs, contracting, and I once said to somebody that used to be in the Navy, I'd love to get into project management, and they said, go to defence. I went to defence. I worked my way into the project management, but I think the barrier there is if there's not a lot of women as role models in project management, how do people or women look and go, I want to follow them, how do I do it? And so I think mentoring is a big thing, but I think the barrier is how do you get into it if there's not the role models that you can see there?
And how do you think organisations can effectively address those obstacles? Mentorship programs?
Mentorship programs. I'm really big on mentorship. I think it's it can help a lot. There's the work-life balance as well, those challenges, and I know that that's changing a lot now, but with the caring and family responsibilities, a lot of men are stepping in with that as well. But I know that when my children were sick, they wanted me home, not my husband or not their father. But interesting enough, my project management career actually started to take off after I had children. So I don't know why that happened or how that happened, but it is tough to juggle it. So I think mentorship and that work-life balance thing, and also I think, well, in a defence perspective too, that because defence is still very male-dominated, although they're trying to change that a lot of wives follow their husband's posting. So I think COVID was actually a good thing from this perspective, is that, you know, you can now work remotely. So a lot of those wives can take on projects and carry through and continue with the work that they were doing if their husbands are being posted.
And NAWIC would like to, in our rhetoric in regards to significant shifts in culture, COVID was a silver lining to actually broaden our horizons on flexibility for all and actually sharing the household duties for all. So it was actually a silver lining for us, and we would almost to the point of, unfortunately, stats for women in construction peaked in catastrophe, which was World War, when we were needed. And then we peaked again at COVID. And I would like to think that with this awareness of culture that's been significant over the last few months, would be another silver lining for us to recruit and retain and move forward in bringing in women into a career in project management and construction.
Fantastic, thanks so much. And look, I'll ask you, Laura, as well, because you come from the infrastructure and water programs.
Yeah.
What about yourself? Like, what are you seeing as a significant barrier for women in project management?
I mean, I think probably very similar to sort of the comments already made. You know, we certainly from my project management team nationally, I mean, our home is probably engineering, and so very similar kind of experiences to the broader construction industry in terms of male-dominated environments. But I think there's probably a couple of particular things around project management that creates additional barriers. I think one of the elements around, you know, that, you know, you've just talked about, Jennifer, in terms of that crafting of the right role and how it needs to be delivered. You know, there's been a very traditional approach to project management where you're in the office or you're at the site and it's 5 days a week, and that's how it's always been done, and so that's how it has to be done. I think that has been a significant barrier. I think there's other things like mobility. The project management cohort have generally been fairly mobile, and that works okay for some people, but traditionally, you know, that is a bit more challenging, as Christina's talked about, for females. So I think some of that is challenging. You know, I think there's also a bit of an experience bias. You know, would probably be the other element that I see specific to project management. We talk about, you know, you want to be a project manager, it's often the lead on a job. And so that comes with a necessarily level of experience that you want to have and that you want to provide your client or provide the project team. And so to try and enable more women in those environments takes a really deliberate process and deliberate succession planning, deliberate advocacy, because otherwise it becomes a fairly self-perpetuating scenario. You look at, well, here are the 3 options for project manager on that job. You know, a male generally is going to have some more experience than perhaps the female counterpart, so you tend to go with that. So I think there is some, you know, apart from sort of general, and I was, you know, just thinking about it, Joe, about, you know, the whole society piece. I mean, I have 3 sons, so how's that for diversity? And, you know, I even get comments like, oh, mum's not supposed to paint, or mum's not supposed to be up a ladder, and I'm just sitting there thinking, how do my 3 boys, of all the people, you know, so there's definitely that, but I think there are some unique things about project management that we should be focused on and aware of to put some deliberate actions in to change.
Absolutely, and I suppose just when you were talking about the barriers, and I wanted to see if there was any sort of subtle biases or barriers that are most common that you see in the industry, because I suppose, Jen, you have access to so many amazing women through NAWIC, and I'm sure they come to you for advice, and that would be the same for you, Joe, with your mentorship. Like, are there any sort of themes or common themes in the barriers that women are facing?
Yes, and like a plethora. And this is why mentorship programs are very important, but that next step of an advocate or a sponsor, that has influence to, oh, that's right, Jenny just spoke to me about wanting to do that project, or wanting to be in that team, wanting to diversify her skill set. To have that advocate and that sponsor is different from mentorship. That mentor can be a sponsor as well, but somebody with influence, because it takes a lot of work to actually shift those and push through those barriers, which will be, like I found when I was trying to be promoted from a PM to a senior PM, I was not in the executive team that were going to all the business development lunches, talking to the clients. I wasn't exposed to the overflow of what that business was, which was these new projects that I wanted to be a part of to get a promotion. And it wasn't until I bypassed those executives and went to the CEO as a sponsor to talk to him on a regular basis, did he have those discussions on my behalf. And within 6 months of starting that process, I was promoted into senior PM role onto exciting projects, industry, committees. So that's what I'd like to say on that.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, Christina, you're coming from the government, and I think when we had our pre-discussion, you spoke about having an advocate in the defence. I'd love to hear a bit more about that, if you could share that.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you that having that champion, that sponsor, can open doors for you. I mean, I think that in itself has helped me with pretty much every step for me progressing and getting promoted. It has been having that champion, that person opening doors, giving me the opportunity to do things that stretch me, but also just being there for how do I get to that next step, and then helping and assisting there. So I 100% agree with that. That has helped me along the way.
My sponsor said to me, "Jen, have you got a 5-year plan?" I said, "Never have I thought of a 5-year plan for myself." And as soon as I put that, be careful for what you wish for. I put down a 5-year plan, I presented it, and I was at least 4 years ahead of it within 6 months. So having those open discussions, having something in place, so it's a two-way street. Do you want this? You're showing that person that you do. This is what you want, and you can make whatever you want happen.
Fantastic. And so, Gerald, I'll ask you, so how can mentorship and sponsorship programs be designed and implemented to support the career growth of women in project management roles?
Before I answer that, I just want to go back to a point, and it's probably something that leaders, managers, owners, directors, whoever you are in the room, like, we seem to always talk about the same things. So we talk about, we struggle with work-life balance, we struggle with parental leave. We talk about, and I've heard a young woman and a young man too be told they have to do their time. Time doesn't equal experience, and presenteeism doesn't equal productivity. And there's a whole bunch of other things I can rattle off. And I think the frustration point for me within all of these conversations is you'll speak to many, many organisations out there who say, we want to innovate, we want to do things differently, we want to attract better people and we want to do things a different way. But the moment that they get challenged on that, all of a sudden it becomes a contentious issue. Agree with what Jen just said. Like, did COVID teach us nothing about how we can actually implement a million different ways to work? And I know and I understand the commercial viability of having people in offices and office spaces and everything else, but this isn't the only way that we can work. It's not the only way we have to work. And I think that as a leader and a manager, if you can't manage your staff going away to have children, then you're probably not doing your job very well, because you get at least 6 months, if not more, notice that that person is going to go and have a child. And I don't know why it's still controversial and why that has to be something that we grapple with as businesses now, but it seems to be this reoccurring theme. We haven't spoken about gender pay gap. I mean, if you want women to stay in your business and perform in your business and be innovative, and why don't you pay them well? Why don't you pay them the same and stop penalising them? You know, it's not fair to expect women in particular to have to deal with both things. They can't possibly go and have children and take the time it takes to do that. I'm not sure if men in the room are that up on what actually happens to women during that sort of stuff, but there is a time element involved in that, and yet we still expect them to come back and still do the same sorts of things. That way of thinking is outdated and old, and so if you want to change the way that your business performs and operates, you need to start changing the way you think and stop using these things as excuses. I'll get off my soapbox. In regard to the question you just said about mentorship, I think it's something that sometimes doesn't do well when people don't understand what it means. And there's a very, very big difference between sponsorship and mentorship and coaching and all those sorts of things. Mentorship, at the crux of it, is really driven by the mentee. And it really has to be something that the mentee pursues, and then the mentor has to understand that their role is not to be a saviour. You're not there to be a superhero and to solve all the problems for everyone, but you are certainly there to provide guidance and support. And I think the programs that I'm predominantly involved in, and whilst they're not specifically, I think, embedded into project management, they span all levels of construction, but we create mentoring circles. And so what you want is to actually create more mentors out of those groups. And NAWIC run a fantastic program, and I am a byproduct of a program from 2003 where my mentor was Alison Myrams, who used to be the CEO of Roberts Co and is an absolute titan. If you don't know her, then you should. But I was paired with her, which is like winning the professional lottery, and she was simply there. She was there to listen when I needed her. She was there to tell me to pull my head in when my ego got too big. But she was certainly there to challenge my way of thinking and my drive. And when I didn't believe in myself, she did. But never ever did she step in and actually take the reins or actually do anything in terms of that way. It was always my choice about where I was going to go. So I think that it's an incredibly powerful thing. When you seek out a mentor, they don't have to be a person above you. They can be around you, and they don't necessarily have to be in your industry. They can be completely separate, but it needs to be someone who knows you well and who's intrinsically going to support your ideas, but also challenge your failings and your weaknesses as well. They're the best mentorship models that work. Other things where I think the lines get blurred is where sometimes it goes a bit off track and it fails, but it's up to the individual to drive that. It's not up to that other person.
Absolutely, because
I think though, and I agree, Jo, and particularly when we're looking at professional associations, I think that's a really great space for them to occupy, that mentorship element, particularly cross sectors and, connecting different people is really important. One of the things that we have been doing though that I think is a really positive is actually having a formal sponsorship program. So all of our leadership team across our business in Australia and New Zealand has a sponsor every year, and it's a high potential female. We've actually just extended it to some of our Indigenous team as well, and that is a completely different relationship, and it is actually about stepping in and saying, okay, well, we see potential in you, let's actually put your 5-year plan together. But then it's up to the leadership team to actually open up opportunities for them to enact that. And what we know over the years, and certainly research, there are a plethora of informal sponsorship avenues, particularly for our male counterparts in construction and engineering, and that's wonderful, and that should still continue. What we don't have is the same sort of informal approach for female or minority groups, and so the idea of the sponsorship program is we're actually calling that out and actively doing that, and we've had some great successes. 2 of my new group leaders in Victoria have come out of the program, and it just gives them an opportunity to associate with senior leaders. It makes the senior leaders think about, well, where would they fit in the business, and what opportunity is there for me as a leader to diversify my team, because all the research shows that diverse teams create better outcomes, more innovation, better business performance. So I think the combination of those things, and the place for associations and NAWIC and AIPM and those type of environments, that mentoring is awesome. But I think from an organisational perspective, we should be taking that next step in terms of actively sponsoring.
And I think that's great that AICOM actually offers that. Christina, do you have a mentorship program in the Defence?
Yeah, we do. And I guess the sad thing, it's not a sad thing, I'm a mentor, it might be, but there's more mentees than mentors. So there's a lot of people reaching out wanting that mentor, so which means I've got 2 mentees this year. It is growing, and there are a lot of women in this mentee program, not so much on the mentor side. But it is a good program, and absolutely 100% agree that it is all about the mentee and the goals that they're trying to meet, and it's not telling them what they should do, it is guiding them and helping them to grow.
So the shortage of mentors, is that a common theme, or like, because I know NAWIC offers, we have AIPM has a great program. Is there a shortage of mentors?
There is a shortage of mentors. Say, for example, Jo here. She probably feels so obliged because there are so few, let's say 3% or less, of women in trade to actually speak to new people in the industry about what they're facing. I bet you've got a lot of mentees, like in terms of natural mentorship. There you go. Because you feel obliged to, and there's 3% of the construction industry that would actually be specific to that person. And that's unfair on the women on trades. So that's where we need industry, associations, government to support programs that help the 3% that have this intrinsic need to help their fellow work colleagues have a good career, progress through, keep in the industry. And most change doesn't happen without an advocate. Just ask me about women playing rugby. It doesn't happen without an advocate. So the associations, the likes of AIPM, thank you Darius for your impetus for women in project management, is key to shifting the dial.
I suppose that leads me into my next question. So what role do professional associations and industry certifications play in promoting gender diversity within the project management field? I am going to go to you, Laura.
I think it's really important, right? I think it's a conversation around diversity, I think, in its entirety, right? And whilst we tend to focus on female diversity, often, I think diversity across the board, whether it be background or persuasion, whatever it is, right? I think associations play a really strong part in it. And one of the things too that I think is really important, that it's a conversation for all of us, I know we've got an all-women panel. It's amazing, and some amazing women here too, right? I think it's a conversation for all of us, to have, not just us having it as females. And, I'm thinking about some of the other associations that have certainly seen, look at this, Consult Australia, which is more of our engineering arm. They have Champions of Change, and that's a great program, right? And that's actually all about senior male leaders in our organisation leaning into our organisations, leaning into this conversation, right? So I think, we often, and I'm sure we all love doing it, feel obliged to be mentors or sponsors, and certainly I get a lot out of that. I think the other part of the equation is actually just not a female conversation, it's a conversation for everybody. And that's an example of a program that I think has been really successful, not only because it's lifting it up to not just be a conversation for females to have, it's a conversation for all of us to have, but it also is a really great collaboration space, right? So people are learning, from each other. We often kind of look at safety, for example, and we say, well, safety's for everybody. There's no IP when it comes to safety. I think when it comes to diversity, it's a similar concept, right? If we're doing something well in one organisation that's working, we should be doing it in all organisations to lift the overall diversity of the sector.
And there's another role for associations to provide services for small to medium businesses that may not have the infrastructure within their business like a tier one. For example, NAWIC have a lot of membership because we have an EAP service free, that in most of our states the mentoring program is free. And so if you've got a small to medium-sized consultancy firm that that is a nice connector. If you don't have that infrastructure, those, the HR team, the diversity team, etc. So we have a role to play that end in supporting the small businesses as well.
Is there any way that you feel that they could enhance their support for women? Is there anything else that could be done that you feel could be the right recipe for increasing mentors or?
Yes, so you can have any program, any policy that sounds beautiful, but if you don't implement it, and if you don't have your middle management implementing it and living and breathing it, you are not going to retain your people. So there's a bit of training that has to be along with those programs and policies for them to be effective. So I would say that that's a big part of the puzzle a CEO may want this for their company, but that needs to cascade all the way down. So that if you are on site or on, down in the trenches, wherever you may be in delivery, that it's actually practiced.
What's your thoughts on that, Jo?
Well, I created Build Like a Girl because I felt that there was a need that wasn't being met. And my work and what I do with that is purely and simply encourage and support women in trade roles because we are 3%. I mean, in Canberra, we're less than 1%. Canberra's terrible, which doesn't speak highly of my work. But, nationally, there's a conversation going on about skills shortage, but 51% of the population are being left out of that conversation. It's just mind-boggling to me. So in 2020, I sat at my dining room table over a weekend and I created Build Like a Girl. It was created out of pure rage. I'd stepped into the general manager role at Kane Constructions. I'd been inundated on social media from women of all ages, all backgrounds, all experiences across construction telling me about the experiences they were having. And many of the younger girls took me back almost 3 decades to when I was starting in my role, and the things that were being said and done to them on site were things that had been said and done to me. And so I sat there for an entire weekend and thought, I can either, keep hearing these stories and do nothing about it, or I can create something where it's needed and see what happens. And maybe I'll fail and, it doesn't matter, at least I've tried. But creating a not-for-profit at your kitchen table in a weekend is not as easy as it sounds. And luckily I got a lot of support. But we're a registered charity and our mission and our only mission is to help those women. We have a 72% first-year female dropout rate for female apprentices. So, think about if 10 women sign up to become a first-year apprentice, 7 of them, more than 7 usually, leave in the first 12 months because of culture issues in construction. And so there's a lot of investment, a lot of funding, a lot of programs that are happening, but we're not fixing the real issue. And the real issue is, again, how we view and value women's contributions. And what we're getting hung up on, and whether it's in project management, whether it's on the ground in trade roles, we're expecting women to behave like men. We're expecting women to do the same job like men do. Please stop. It's not meant to be that way. We will never work like you. There's probably a reason I don't work like some of you. We are different. Embrace the differences. Embrace the differences in all diversity. That is how change is made, that's how innovation is made, and that's how we step away from the past 30 years of stagnation. The construction industry is dying at the moment. Absolutely dying, because we haven't been able to move on, and we thought that COVID was going to be the great reset, and it's been nothing but the great resignation, because men and women are leaving the industry in droves, because it's a toxic workplace, it's inflexible, and we're not willing to change. The answer's sitting right in front of us, we're just not brave enough to take it, but we're still not willing to let women have an equal say in that conversation. We're still not willing to accept their differences. I mean, think about the challenges that women particularly have in terms of if you're a young woman and you suffer with endometriosis or other female-based conditions, which is becoming more and more spoken about and more prevalent in terms of the challenges physically being out on a construction site, and then don't get me started on menopause. And everyone's probably just cringed in the room, right? We are faced with more fundamental challenges as females in our working lives that I don't think anybody else can comprehend. Yet we're only starting to have the conversation and we're still going about the same way of work that we've done for God knows how long, and we're expecting a different result. We need to be brave and we need to be bold and we need to understand that women bring a very different aspect to a business, but don't expect them to be the same as men, because we will never get there. But we can bring differences, and they're really positive differences, and I think that that is the conversation that needs to be had. And instead of rehashing the same things over and over again and talking about the problems, we really need to say, here's the solution, here's how we move forward, here's how we do it together. That's the next step.
And you've been doing amazing work, so congratulations, it's fantastic. Jen and I were actually talking about statistics, and it was quite alarming this morning because
we love data.
Jen corrected me this morning. I was like, oh, there's 13% of women in construction at the moment. She's like, no, there's not. Jen, would you like to talk to that? And do you think there's a way, like a light at the end of the tunnel for that?
Yeah, so Joe just alluded to it. Remember we said, COVID was the next peak. Yes, it did peak at 13%, and last year it dropped to 12%. And with this, we've known this trajectory of percentage. If it continues on the same trajectory, we'll have no change for at least another 100 years. So this is why the associations with government and industry have to work together to actually shift that dial. And what I'd say about the last few months in regards to culture and those, those stereotypes that Joe mentioned, is to actually highlight those issues, the elephant in the room, to then actually address it. Because it's not only you had some pretty bad stats on the female apprentices, which I didn't know they were that bad, but male apprentices are just as bad in terms of completing those as well. There you go. So in a industry of property and construction where those percentages or stats are around, how are we going to recruit if people know about that? The mothers, the fathers, the caregivers do not want their kids in that industry. Hands up who would, in this room, knowing those stats, including the worst suicide rates for men, would have their child enter property and construction.
Yeah, we'll just get you the mic. That's okay, no problems. I'd love you to introduce yourself, please, and let us know where the company you're from.
Hi, Karen Altman. I work at Defence. I used to work for WorkCover Queensland many years ago, and I was an employer advisor, and I looked after the labour hire industry, which has a lot of construction in it. My ex-husband is a builder. My younger son is also a builder carpenter. And it was a fact that the bullying of young apprentices, whatever gender and mainly male at the time, was a real issue. Now, I haven't worked for WorkCover for over 20 years. So this is something that has been going on for a long, long time. And I know that when my son was an apprentice, he was with a particular host because he was through group training. And he came home and told me that his boss was shooting at him with his nail gun. Now, I was horrified as a parent. I didn't tell him he couldn't do it, but I was about ready to tear that host to bits. And I just said to him, you go and tell your boss that you've told me this, and tell him it's not funny and you don't want it to happen again. But the claims that I saw come through WorkCover Queensland with the pranks that they played on apprentices, and until men realise in this industry that it is not funny to play these tricks on kids, it will never fix the construction industry.
In fairness, to also men in the industry, and having spent almost 3 decades in the industry, I honestly believe that the part of the industry that is toxic, that doesn't welcome diversity and certainly behaves in that sort of behaviour, I believe is only about 20 or 25% of the industry. I do not believe it is the majority, and that's based on my experience working on building sites my whole career. The issue that we have in construction across the board is the bystander effect, because we can deal with the 20 or 25% of toxic people. They show themselves, you can deal with them. There's new legislation in place, particularly WorkSafe ACT have been very, very good, Fair Work as well, with bringing sexual harassment and sexual assault in as notifiable incidences, and that has started to make people stand up and take notice about how serious this is. The bystander effect is the thing that I battle with on a daily basis. It's the people that stand by and watch that behaviour and don't call it out. And we're all guilty of it. Every single person in this room, I'll give you some examples. Basic example, so a young site engineer came up to me after I did a keynote speech down in Melbourne and said, we were doing an inspection out on site, and the very much older project manager, so she was a woman of colour, young woman of colour, site engineer, very, very fresh and green on this site. Older man came over, put his arm around her, pulled her in nice and tight, was hugging her as they were doing this, and there was a whole bunch of people around, and she felt incredibly uncomfortable. And after that was, finished and they all wandered off, several people came over to her and said, "That was really creepy, are you okay?" Now, not one person at the time called him out, and not one person went after him afterwards and said, "Don't ever do that again, that's really inappropriate." They came to her. So yes, they asked if she was okay, but they didn't call out that behaviour. Another example, and all of you will know this, have you ever stood in an office, let's say around the water cooler, and someone's told a really off-colour joke that's totally inappropriate? But some people laugh awkwardly and some people might put their heads down, but not a single person actually speaks up and calls it out. That was your moment. That was your moment to call it out and chip away at the issues of culture that we have, not just in construction, not just in project management, in all the workplaces, but it's the bystander effect. And it's the bystander effect that lets bullying like that happen every single day. People perpetrating it are the minority. They really are. But the rest of us stand back, and we do it all the time. We do it all the time, every day in our workplace. We let those little things slide because we don't want to call them out. That is how we change culture. That is how we change behaviour. We need to be brave and bold enough every single day to turn up. And it's that whole thing of speak even if your voice shakes. All you need to do is say, "Hey, that's not appropriate, please don't do that here." It's a small act of resistance. And it's terrifying to do the first time, particularly if you're a younger person. But if you do that, I will absolutely guarantee you that someone else will speak up and jump on board. They're just waiting for someone else to do it. And this is how we change. And it's not big moments, it's not big gestures, it's not big actions. It's those little things that we chip away that starts creating a much nicer workplace for everyone, not just women. We're the problem. And I know that's controversial, but yeah, in the words of Taylor Swift, "Hi, it's me, I'm the problem." We've got to be better. We are the bystanders. We're allowing that stuff to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you have something else that you wanted to include on that, Jen? No? Sorry.
NAWIC has a recent research paper specifically around microaggressions. So I'd suggest that if you can even Google that phrase, word microaggressions, it's all those little things adding up, okay? NAWIC microaggressions, okay? So the fact that it has to be termed is a bit late because it's been happening for 30 years you've been working, and a good 100 years. So just Google that.
Do you think there's any sort of initiatives that you've seen or strategies that have been implemented within a workplace that has created a safe and supportive environment for women in your organisation? I'll look to you, Laura.
I mean, I think it's a work in progress for most people, right? I think, and it's just interesting, kind of listening, and whilst it's not ideal, and I'm sure we've all got stories. I've got stories very similar to some of those things. I think for me, trying to look forward, right? It's a leadership conversation for me, and and I give this example. I call it my ice cream story because it's I don't know, maybe I'll get a bit of a laugh out of the audience, but it was actually just when I'd started at AIPM, and I was doing some work directly for our CEO, which was excellent, but didn't know him very well. And I had 3 kids at home, my husband was away, and I was trying to negotiate a contract. And the guys on the other end were like, okay, well, we'll grab some dinner and then we'll reconvene at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I was like, oh, God, 8 o'clock, that's like bedtime. How am I going to manage this? Trying to pretend like the kids didn't exist. And so I bribed the kids because I'm completely okay with that, which was, we'll go and get McDonald's ice creams if you just be quiet and let me do this. And so bundled the 3 kids into the car. We went through drive-through McDonald's. I had the guys on speaker. We were negotiating, a couple of contractors. So it's always fun to tussle with those guys. And I thought I'd put my phone on mute. And of course I hadn't. So I roll up and I'm like, can I have 3 soft serve ice creams, please? And, oh, there you go, got a laugh. And the guys on the phone, the guys on the phone, they're like, are you there, Laura? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, are you buying ice cream? I'm like, yep, I'm buying ice cream. And they're like, oh, okay. Anyway, so we finished that, and they sort of had a bit of a giggle, but I walked into the room the next day, and we were face to face, and my CEO was already there. I was running a bit late. And they were all having a massive laugh, and I'm thinking, oh God, this is about the ice creams, I'm sure. And I was cringing. And the thing that surprised me, and it shouldn't surprise me, but the thing that I really valued was actually the conversation they were having was how amazing that you can negotiate while buying ice cream with 3 kids in the car. And my CEO was really positive in that it wasn't something they shouldn't have been doing. In fact, he was mortified that I even was on the phone that late at night for a start, right? But in front of the guys that I was negotiating with, he was really supportive and going, well, Jesus, if she can get that across the line while she's buying ice cream, imagine how good she'd be if she wasn't having to buy ice cream. So I think it's the little things, right? But I do think it starts at the top, right? It's got to start with the leaders in our organisations, the leaders in our associations, and it's for everyone to lean in, absolutely. So whilst sometimes, it does feel doom and gloom and depressing, I do take comfort in some of the things that I see. And I think they're the things that we've got to start to talk about and start to kind of propagate, because it is a leadership and culture conversation.
Absolutely, those small changes make such a difference. Jen, what about from your perspective at JLL? How have they implemented some strategies that have been creating a safe environment for your women?
We're going through a process of review, and that's because I'm a champion of that process. So there's discussions, which is fantastic, and identifying that there needs to be a shift, a process, a program. They've got great policies, absolutely great policies that help me recruit into my team. And I've done some great diversity recruitment myself, but the wider group has not been able to do that. So we're going to have to go through a nationwide push for getting diversity into our teams, because we want diversity of thought. We want that innovation, and we want everyone to feel welcome. So we're starting right now.
Fantastic. And what about from a defence perspective, Christina?
I guess from the point of view of safety in the workplace, I mean, we all are very much aware of the Royal Commission into veteran suicide and the report that's just come down. There's a lot of recommendations coming out of that. Defence is absolutely very serious about really changing that for both men and women. It's not one-sided at all. So that's probably the really big thing from that point of view, but not necessarily in the project management space, but there is a lot of things happening and initiatives happening in the STEM environment at the moment, and it's mainly in the military side of things, so the military services, ADF, but there is no reason why that can't carry through into the whole of defence as well. So they're really looking at that diversity and trying to get what they've got an initiative in place at the moment in the STEM of having 40-40-20, so it's 40% men 40% women, and then the last 20% can be either or. And that's been a real success so far, that they've actually had 50% of women coming into that. So there is a real drive in defence, but from the safety point of view in that Royal Commission.
Fantastic. I'm conscious that we're almost cutting into time.
And we thought we wouldn't have enough to talk about.
Absolutely. I would love to, if you would like to have anything else to add, otherwise maybe we can take it to the audience, and if they have any questions for our panellists today, please put your hand up. I'm going to have Steph run around with the microphone. Don't be shy. Do we have any questions? Yes, please. Thank you so much. Please, if you can state your name and where you're from, that would be great.
Hi, thank you guys so much. I'm Sarah Hill, I'm from Hydro Tasmania. I just wanted to touch a little bit on kind of that bystander culture, the reporting culture. How do you support hesitance in reporting incidents where there might be a company culture of, how do I put it, not reporting? We don't want to report because that looks bad on our statistics, those sorts of things. How do you change that company culture to encourage people who might not previously have come forward?
Jen, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. So, I mentioned that you can have any policy, any program, but it needs to be, trickled down, educated to actually implement it. And I would say that starts with the weekly team meeting, being open about those discussions of anything reportable. And then it needs to a team lead or a leader to report something themselves, and to show that it's a process that is not scary, that this is a process, this is culture, we want to all come to work and, return home. We want to rock up, we want to get home. So just calm down the scare factor of it, and just do it. I've had to do it myself in the last couple of months, and nip it in the bud really quickly. Show action and show that it's not scary and that it's for the benefit of everyone coming to work, returning, and not crying at the end of the night in the shower. Yep. And I think just leading by example is a big way to go.
I think it's important to also establish that it's not just for women, it's for everybody in the workplace. Yep. Absolutely. Did anyone else would like to have a response to that question?
Oh, look, I think it's hard, and I think, I think, as you said, Jennifer, that, leading by example is really important. I think also acknowledging that particularly some of the incidents in this type of area can be difficult for people, so it doesn't have to be reported in the same way. It can be reported on behalf of others. I find also informal avenues, as you say, there's definitely people within our organisation that tend to be the go-tos, and I think that is a positive, but I think it's just going to, like safety reporting, right? Once upon a time, people are like, we don't want to, and there's probably still organisations that do this that don't want to report because their stats don't look great, right? But I think we've bridged that, but it is a leadership piece and a cultural piece.
And I think showing, if it is, reportable to the funder, showing that you've resolved it, in my eyes, is streets ahead of anything, that you're addressing it. I think that's just as important.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, I think there was another question over here. Yes, thanks.
Sorry, I should have stayed on that side of the room.
Hi, I'm Eunice Vandal Grayling from Sunshine Coast Council. I've been involved to a small extent in the past as a younger, I started civil engineering, in what they call reverse mentoring. So what that entailed is from, you know, the younger generation of females getting the feedback of, you know, lived experiences, etc., and that might highlight, you know, some particular issues, or it advises mentors and sponsors what particular issues there are. So I was just keen to hear from the panel if you had any past, you know, instances of that happening, and any positive feedback, because, yeah, from my perspective, I was back in consultancy before I was with local government. That has had a very positive impact, and I can see some females that were part of that back in the day currently having progressed very well in their careers.
I'm happy. Yeah, it's a great call out. I think you know, we have a Connect group in our organisation, which is our young sort of graduate. I think it's 1 to 5 maybe years, and we always love when they come in, because they definitely keep it real, right, in terms of what's actually happening in the organisation and what they're seeing, and what they're after, and what, you know, what is important to them. So I think, putting aside the sort of diversity, female diversity piece, I think it's really important to have that conversation. And I think just like we see this, you know, quite prominently in engineering, you know, we've gone through, even in the engineering world, this concept of we have to have diverse people engineering our solutions, because they have to be fit for the community, you know. And so, I mean, I know, and I'm sure you're all the same, and you know, men and women, when you go into big cities, for example, and they've got underpasses, you know, walkway underpasses. I know I actually cross major highways before I go under underpasses, because it's scary and confronting, and I don't like it, right? And one of the things that we know in engineering is if you didn't have a female at the table, or some diverse thinking at the table, that's probably something that is pretty business as usual, right? A walkway underpass, right? But now we know that that is actually not a good solution, and we start to look at sort of different solutions. And I think it's the same for, you know, for generational as well, you know, where, you know, all of us are contributing to the next generation in terms of infrastructure, or whatever it is we might be building, property, you know, and whatnot. And so understanding what's important to the younger generation, and understanding and hearing what they're thinking and feeling is super important. And, you know, whilst sometimes our Connect group, we can't quite always meet the demands or their expectations, it's a really important conversation, and I think it makes us a stronger organisation for it. So I'm a big advocate for that. They do like keeping it real, though.
We at JLL, we've got what do they call it, Gen Z group, and they implemented a U Day that was because there is a big emphasis on mental well-being at JLL, and the U Day is to be taken without question from your manager, whatever you like. And you get four a year, and they advocated for this for several months, and so it's in place. And I want to lead by example, but I'm finding it hard to take a day off for no reason, without something attached to it, without a purpose. I'm like, what are these young kids doing on this day? So I said, you've got to manage up on this one. Tell me what I'll take my day off. So I'm taking one off this Friday, and I'm not doing anything.
Excellent. You've made that
Lessons.
sound really stressful. We've got another one over here.
Good afternoon, Aaron Littlefair from Oricon. You mentioned before about a lack of mentors in the business. What's your opinion in regards to, we see a lot of programs, and we're in an ideal world, potentially another woman as the mentor is potentially ideal. How do you see the opinion of bringing men in, and potentially why don't we do it more often? To one, be that mentor, but then also to help bridge that gap so there doesn't build up to be any ostracisation between having men and women programs.
Can I just say, having a woman is not ideal. So there's absolutely no requirement for a woman to have a female mentor. There's probably some lived experience similarities there, but particularly for me, it has been the men in my life as mentors who have defined my career and probably driven me to the places that I needed to go more so than women. So
Me as well, I'd agree.
I really think that we need to not even have that as a thought, and really understand. And again, you know, I come back to what I said before, like our point of difference is actually the strength, and then there also has to be the complement. And so your lived experience is gold, particularly probably to a younger woman in terms of, sure, you can't necessarily say what it's like to be a young woman as a project manager, but you can certainly speak about your experience and what you've done and understand that it might be a little bit harder for her to make those same steps in the same way, but that's what you can provide. And so I think it's vitally important. You know, I have run an organisation called Build Like a Girl. I try and get more female tradeswomen into the industry. You know, a few weeks ago at an event, a guy turned around and said, "You must really hate men." And I said, why would I exist in an industry that is the third largest employer of Australia and the most male dominated if I didn't want to associate with men? It's been the men in the industry and in my entire career who have shaped who I am as a person and a professional and have been instrumental in that growth. Sure, there's been some really crappy experiences with some guys, but like I said before, that has been a minority. The majority of the experience has been men who have recognised talent, have recognised my ability to work hard, who have been willing to support me because they know that I have that strong drive to succeed, and so they position themselves to help and guide that. And I think that, you know, for the men in the room, you don't understand the power and privilege you hold in your hands right now in terms of being able to help those people around you in a much bigger and larger way. And you know, I always talk with my team about throwing you forward. My job is to throw you forward. And what that means is that if I can throw you in advance of me and all of a sudden you start looking like you're going to become my boss, I have done my job well. And it doesn't matter who you are and where you are, but that is the goal. And the goal is to bring as many people with you. And I can tell you right now, having a one-out hit and only thinking about yourself and your own career progression might be fine for a little while, but it gets really boring and really lonely. And if you can bring as many people as you can and as many diverse people as you can with you, it's a whole lot of fun and you've done your job well, and that's your legacy, and that's really what you should be striving for. So absolutely reach out to women and say, I can be here for you, because that is worth its weight in gold.
Christina, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I just want to also say that I guess all my mentors, all my sponsors, champions have all been men, other than I've got a woman now that is championing me at the moment. But, you know, being in a male-dominated area as defence, it actually has helped me to navigate, I think, defence. And it's not to try to emulate and be a man. It is just to understand the thinking. And it also, I think, as you said, Jo, it makes the men realise that, hey, there are some women here that can do this and they're really eager to do it. So it probably opens their eyes just as much. So, yeah, really encourage the men to be the mentors of women. And I must say, and I don't really want to say it too harshly, but my probably least supporter was a woman. So I agree that it's not always best to have a woman, but, you know, women, we need to look after each other too.
And just being mindful that mentorship doesn't have to be formal. There's all those different levels. It's how are you going? Can I help you with something? Let's go over coffee. Something as simple as that can change, you know, somebody's super bad day or their quandary on something. So, you know, reach out to your teammates.
Thanks so much. We've got one more question.
Hi, this has been really a great conversation. I'm just wondering if there are any industries outside of our own where we see that diversity is actually being done well, and whether we can borrow any, I guess, you know, approaches from those industries.
That's a really good question.
I think sorry, go.
We NAWIC toyed or investigated this topic and came across it's not a full, 50-50, but mining industry is doing great work. IT has a similar stats, not as bad, but we can learn from them as well. And when I was talking to trade associations, just in terms of shift work, there's a lot to be learnt from the health industry and their shift changes, just in terms of that swing around, working together, and yeah, so there's many cross-industry experience to share, yep.
Defence did great stuff, didn't it?
Yeah, trying to get the women in. So yes, throughout the ADF, there's a big drive for bringing women in and making it, I guess, changing the culture there to making it a safe place for them, but also encouraging. There are jobs there for everybody. And I think especially in defence as a whole, HR and finance are very women-dominated. I'm not sure why that can't then go into project management, because you've got your HR, you've got your relationship, your project team, you've got your finance there, so there's just a few other things that should encourage people to get into as well.
To answer your question though, who's done it well in reverse has been the education sector and the health sector, where that was typically female dominated, particularly around nursing, lower levels teaching, childcare, and there's been a lot of work done to actually attract more men into those industries because they were tipped in the opposite direction. I think that, construction has been failing miserably. I think defence and mining have actually shone a light on what needs to happen when you have a reckoning. We just haven't had that yet, and I think we're closely followed by the law sector as well, which has some pretty dismal sort of statistics as well. But I think in reverse, there's been a lot of work done in education and health to increase male participation. I think we need to study that and learn from that as well.
Absolutely, great question. I think we're going to have one.
Yep. One more of it. You okay if we squeeze one more in?
Absolutely. If we have time, thank you. Thanks for engaging.
Alexis Nguyen from Sistra. I just wanted to sort of tell a brief story, because people remember stories and I'm telling it sort of second or third hand. But my son a few years ago was speaking to someone at BHP, and I remember she said mining, and they actually had a huge problem with turnover of their fly-in, fly-out staff, because absences create divorce. It was simple. They did a study because they'd put on a couple of female drivers, those great big trucks that are where the tyres, you need a ladder to get to the top. And they were saving massive amounts of money on tyres, brakes, fuel. They then decided to have a conscious policy of employing female truck drivers. The unintended consequence was it slowed the churn rate, because where they traditionally had blokes flying into the mine, they were now bringing their missus with them. They were both earning heaps of money, super happy and really, really happy to stay. And so I think, there's been a lot of information today, but we do need to bring it back to what are the benefits of being diverse and opening up that space to allow women to come in and to develop. And I know, they're still only coming in as female drivers and not necessarily into other trades, but it did open that door for women to come into other FIFO areas as well. I just want to share that with the audience, that we need to think just beyond that number, whether it's 50-50, 40-40, 20, what are the real consequences and what are the unintended consequences that can have really positive benefits.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I really appreciate it. I think we've made time, if that's, yep. Thank you so much, everybody, for engaging and for listening, and thank you so much to our expert panels for being here and taking the time with being us today. Thank you so much to the AIPM. I hope everyone's joining us back here to have the Project Management Achievement Awards, so we look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, team, and one more round of applause for our excellent facilitator, Lauren. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies, I won't take long. You are free to leave the stage if you like. But folks, I just want to let you know there's a Women in Project Leadership Summit coming up in March next year. That's on the 7th of March.